Reach up and touch the top of your head. Feel that bone right there? That thin little dome of bone is the only thing standing between the outside world and your actual living brain. Now picture this. You're lying on the ground, wide awake. Someone you trust is kneeling over you holding a sharpened piece of stone, and they start scraping a hole through that bone while you're conscious. No anesthesia, no hospital, no antibiotics, just you, a rock, and a very calm guy who has obviously done this before. Every instinct in your body is screaming that this is the last thing you will ever feel. And it wasn't. People got up from this. They walked away and lived for years. Thousands of them, for thousands of years, on basically every continent. So before you write off your ancestors as a bunch of idiots banging rocks together, sit with this one. They were doing brain surgery. And they were weirdly, almost insultingly good at it. Let's start with the obvious question. How do we even know they survived instead of, immediately dying with a hole in their head? The skull tells on them. When you cut into living bone and the person lives, the bone does what bone does. It heals. The edges of the hole go smooth and round and start growing back. So when we dig up a skull with a clean hole in it and the rim is all healed over, that's not a murder. That's a recovery. That's somebody who took a rock to the head from a doctor on purpose and then went home and lived long enough for the wound to close. And we have found a lot of these. I mean, a lot. At one burial site in France from around 6,500 years before Christ, they dug up 120 skulls. 40 of them had holes. That's 1 in 3. 1 in 3 people in this little community had been cracked open at some point, and most of them healed. This wasn't a freak event. This was just Tuesday. And it wasn't one weird village in France. We found these drilled, healed skulls in Russia, in China, across the Americas, in North Africa. Over 1,500 of them just from the Stone Age, scattered all over the world, made by people who had never met each other and had no possible way to compare notes. Everybody, independently, looked at the human head and went, "Yeah, you know what would fix that? A hole." And some people came back for seconds. There are skulls with 2 holes, 3 holes, more, all healed. Which means the same person got drilled, recovered, and at a later point decided the move that worked last time was worth another go. You ever get a second opinion? These guys got a second hole. Now, let's talk about the part you've been dreading since the first sentence. The pain. Because yes, in a lot of places, you were awake for this. But the good news, if you can even call it that, is that they were not complete animals about it. Over in Peru, where they got truly elite at this, they had a whole plan. First, they'd get you drunk. There was a fermented corn beer called chicha, and they would pour it into the patient to take the edge off. Probably the surgeon, too. Then they'd pack coca leaves into the wound. The same plant cocaine comes from. And coca doesn't just numb things, it tightens up the blood vessels, so it actually cut down the bleeding from your scalp, which, by the way, bleeds like a busted faucet. So the real picture is this: a slightly drunk patient, a slightly drunk surgeon, a mouth and a wound stuffed with coca, and a guy with a steady hand. It's grim, but it's a system. They thought this through, and the tools were not the random sharp rocks you're picturing. In Peru, they used obsidian, which is volcanic glass, and obsidian can be flaked into an edge sharper than the steel scalpel your actual surgeon uses today. Their favorite blade was a curved knife called a tumi. Later on, they upgraded to bronze and copper. And these were different procedures depending on the injury. Sometimes they scraped the bone away in thin layers. Sometimes they carved a little circle and popped the disc of bone out clean. They picked the method based on how bad your head was. That's not panic. That's a surgeon making a call. Oh, and if there was a gap left in your skull afterward, some of them patched it. With gold. You could walk around with a little gold plate in your head. The original luxury upgrade. Okay, now for the line that should actually bother you. Fast forward to the United States, the 1860s, the American Civil War. Trained doctors, metal instruments, real anatomy textbooks. They did skull surgery too on wounded soldiers, and about half of those patients died. Somewhere around 46 to 56%. A coin flip. The Inca, with stone and bronze and corn beer 400 years earlier, their patients lived somewhere between 75 and 90% of the time. Let that sit for a second. A guy with a rock and a bag of leaves had better odds of keeping you alive than a doctor with a medical kit and a diploma centuries later. The Civil War surgeon would have done you a favor by handing you to the caveman. So why were they even doing this? Mostly, honestly, it was smart. The biggest reason was head trauma. People got clubbed, people fell, people took rocks to the skull in fights, and when that happens, the bone can crack inward and blood can pool up and press on the brain, and that pressure will kill you. Drilling a hole lets the pressure out. It lets the blood drain. It is, no joke, the correct medical response. We still do it. Were there weirder reasons mixed in? Sure. In some places, if you had headaches or seizures, or you were just acting strange, the going theory was that an evil spirit was trapped in your head, and the fix was to open a little window and let it out. Was that wrong? Medically, completely. Did it sometimes accidentally work because you also happened to have pressure on your brain? Also, yes. They were right for the wrong reasons way more often than they had any right to be. They got so confident about it that at one point, in France, somebody trepanned a cow. An actual cow. We found the skull from around 3,000 years before Christ with the same surgical hole in it. The cow, sadly, did not make it. But picture the mind that masters human brain surgery and then thinks, let's see if this works on the livestock. Maybe it was a vet. Maybe it was an experiment. Maybe it was just a really bad afternoon for one specific cow. We'll never know. But it might be the oldest animal surgery on the planet, and it is very funny that it happened at all. But this is the part that really gets you. This surgery never actually went away. It didn't get invented and then lost to time. It just kept running the whole time, getting a little sharper every century until it quietly turned into something you'd recognize on sight. Because if you walk into a hospital today with bleeding on the brain, you know what the surgeon does? They drill a hole in your skull to let the pressure out. They call it a burr hole. The bigger version is a craniotomy, and it is the exact same fundamental move that some person was doing with a sharpened rock 7,000 years ago. Same problem, same solution, same hole. The only thing that really changed is that the guy holding the drill went and got a medical degree, and the corn beer turned into real anesthesia. But that calm person leaning over you, carefully opening your skull to save your life, you've met him before. He just used to work in a cave. So the next time you flinch at a needle, remember this. Your ancestors were getting their heads drilled open while wide awake, telling each other it was fine, and then walking it off. They earned that bone you just touched. They were tougher than you. And weirdly, they were better doctors than half the people who came after them.